Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's SCMA's virtual event, Mediators and Therapists Working Together for Better Outcomes to Family Mediations. My name is Bubia Yulin, and I'm the Director for SCMA. As you can tell, this event is in meeting format, which means you can see and hear us, and we can see and hear you. So we ask that you stay muted throughout the presentation. This event is also being recorded. You will receive a link to the recording no later than Friday next week. If you have any questions regarding our event, please feel free to send me a chat or send me an email at info@scmediation.org. At this time, I'd now like to introduce our event sponsor, Matt Havervold from Our Family Wizard.
Thank you, Bouvier. Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Havervold. I've been with Our Family Wizard for 7.5 years or so. Very happy to be a sponsor of this webinar today with this great panel. I'm just going to take a couple quick minutes to give everybody a brief overview and update on what the Our Family Wizard platform is. And for those of you who are already familiar with us, I'm excited to show you our most recent update that rolled out just a month ago with the parenting schedules. But for those of you who maybe haven't heard of us before, Our Family Wizard is a communication tool that was created specifically for divorced and separated parents to help reduce conflict and provide tools to help the family stay organized and communicate, share schedules, exchange information, post receipts for expenses. There's also a portal for professional access that allows family law practitioners like mental health professionals that are working with families to be linked up through Our Family Wizard to oversee communication and interact with the family as needed. It's a mobile app and a website. Once parents sign up, they have an account and they can communicate with each other from anywhere with an internet connection. There's a messaging system, so parents send messages back and forth, very similar to texting and emailing. They can add attachments to their messages. Here we have an example. There's a school trip, there's a permission slip, and then a trip announcement, one parent sending to the other parent. All messages on Our Family Wizard include read receipts, so you always know when a message has been read for the first time. So if you're John Smith sending Mary Smith this permission slip, you don't have to question whether or not she received it. You know the date and time that she opened it and viewed it. We have a feature that we call Tone Meter, which is like an emotional spell check for your tone. So when a parent is writing a message, Tone Meter looks for inflammatory language. It'll flag words and phrases that are maybe perceived in a negative way by the other side, bring it to their attention, give them a chance to maybe think twice before they hit the send button. There's a shared calendar on Our Family Wizard, and just about less than a month ago, we rolled out a new system for our parenting schedules. So Our Family Wizard now has built-in templates for all of your common parenting rotations. And then they can start with these templates, customize them as needed. So for example, if they're gonna have a 223, a 2255, they can select the template that applies to their parenting plan. They can edit it as needed, indicate the dates and times that exchanges are taking place. And then it's gonna give them a really nice color-coded, clean, easy to understand representation of their parenting schedule. So here you're seeing a monthly schedule. It's color-coded to show which days parent A has and which days parent B has. They can also add events and appointments to the schedule as needed. And then on top of the parenting schedule, parents can assign the holidays. So this will override the parenting schedule with the color coding to show the complete parenting plan. You can even get a yearly view as well. With this new update, parents can now put their parenting schedule on their account from the mobile phone, which is something that was previously not available. You used to have to go to the website. And once we introduced that, the number of parenting schedules on Our Family Wizard more than doubled in less than the first 2 weeks. So it's really great that more parents have access to it and more parents are taking advantage of it. Additional features, parents can negotiate to make changes to their parenting time. They can go back and forth if they want to make a time modification, ultimately reach an agreement for temporary changes to their parenting schedule. They can share moments and positive parenting milestones and interactions. Information bank, upload insurance cards, important files and documents that both parents would need access to. With the expenses, they can post receipts and keep track of all shared expenses for the children. Normally, Our Family Wizard, our standard cost, $99 a year per parent. It's a subscription. We do have a fee waiver. Any parents that are receiving court fee waivers, or if you're representing or working with a parent on a pro bono basis or on a sliding scale, will be completely free for those clients. We also have a military discount for former or active military. I'm the California representative for OFW, so if anyone has questions, if you want an example of a mediation template to include our family wizard and a parenting plan, or just any other additional information, please don't hesitate to contact me. My email is matt@ourfamilywizard.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you to Our Family Wizard for supporting this virtual event and for continuing to support SCMA. It's a wonderful program, and we always love having you on to speak to our organization. So thanks again, Matt. I would now like to introduce to you our webinar host, Marvin Whistler.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about how mediators and therapists might help each other to help our clients achieve better outcomes in conflicts, in divorce, and other family situations. As we move through the discussion, you'll also realize how alike we are and how different we are in what we do. I came up with the idea for this panel discussion about a year and a half ago. I regularly network with therapists, and I realized that there wasn't really much about how therapists and mediators can actually work together. So I talked to a few of my friends for the panelists today, and we decided that it would be a good idea to move ahead and make this presentation. So here we are. Before I introduce the rest of the panel, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself if you don't already know. I've been mediating since 1991, doing various types of mediation. I started in community mediation. I achieved my MA in negotiation and conflict management from Cal State Dominguez in 2005. And in 2014, I decided to open my practice for divorce mediation and other family issues. And that's what I've been doing since then, as well as working in the dependency court, helping families there to create and decide on their parenting plans. That's all for me. Now I'd like to introduce Judith Weigel, who will actually be facilitating this afternoon. Judy.
Thank you, Marvin. And this was an absolute pleasure putting this together with you. It was a labor of love, and with all of the panelists. So thank all of you, and thank all of you for joining us today. I come from a live entertainment background, specifically starting with the circus, and then I fast forward to divorce. So I think it's an apt transition. I have been a mediator for 12 years, in family law for 9.5 of those years. I've been a legal document assistant for 8 years, and a legal document assistant is a paralegal on steroids. It allows me to file for pro per litigants in family court without an attorney overseeing me. I've also been a communications coach for 5 years, because in family conflict, communication really needs help, and communication is king. That it really helps resolve anything, the way we communicate, as we all know. And then lastly, I've had a podcast for the last 2.5 years, formerly called Constructive Uncoupling, rebranded to the Amicable Divorce Expert. And I hope you all join me on that. Let me throw this over to Victoria.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to take my cues from Judith and sort of give you a chronology of my life, which is long at this point. I've been a member of the California Bar for 34 years. I completed my first mediation training in 1995, and it was the one that was offered by the LA County Bar. I discovered pretty quickly that I was a peacemaker and not a real litigator, and I left business litigation and went to California Lawyers for the Arts, which is where I learned about mediation for the first time. We had a program called Arts Arbitration and Mediation Services. And I started doing all my continuing education, legal education in mediation training, starting then. And then I had kids, and there was a whole lot of other stuff that happened between then. And then my decision to go back to graduate school in 2009 to become a licensed marriage and family therapist. And currently I divide my time between a divorce mediation practice, my psychotherapy practice where I treat individuals, couples, and families, and do some consulting attorney work for mediated divorces, and divorce mediation. So that's what I'm about, and I'm happy to be here and hope that we can have a lively discussion that will be helpful to everybody.
Thank you, Victoria. Kathy, how about you? Are you unmuted, Kath? Marvin, we need help. Marvin rescues us when we have technical glitches.
Wait a minute, what happened here? Okay.
Okay, we can hear you. We can hear you. Good. Okay,
You can
Kath,
hear
you're
me?
on. Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon. Happy to be here with everybody. My name is Kathy Memel. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and child custody and parenting plan mediator. I specialize in helping clients move through all stages of separation and divorce and help them navigate their emotions so they can make informed decisions, not emotional ones. I have a dedicated passion to helping divorcing parents stay out of the courtroom by helping them create their own positive parenting plans when possible. I've been practicing for more than 35 years and have a private practice here in Beverly Hills. I'm a former family law paralegal and a former conciliation court mediator, and happy to be here with all of you today.
Thank you, Dr. Memel. We have to give you that credential. And Michelle Hahn, please.
Hi, everyone. I am a licensed marriage family therapist. I work exclusively with couples. My passion in life is to actually keep them together through greater understanding and closer connection. I do have a law degree, and I am utilizing both by working for a company called Conflict Resolution Training, where I teach therapists about the mediation process. So I kind of work from both ends. My primary passion, though, is working with couples and keeping them actually together. I'm based here in Santa Monica, but now I'm telehealth, so I'm in the state of California. Thanks for your time and your attention, and I look forward to hearing about what you guys do and what your questions are today.
Thank you, Michelle. So let me lay the groundwork for what we're going to be discussing. Mediators and therapists working in family law or family conflict have a common connection in working with people's emotions. Mediators work around the emotions of the parties as they make settlement decisions, from co-parenting plans, division of assets and debts, spousal and child support, and substance abuse issues that affect settlement decisions. Therapists, on the other hand, work with their clients' emotions so that they can make settlement decisions less emotionally and with clarity. In this discussion, we'll see how mediators and therapists can work directly together to serve the divorcing clients, or indirectly to help the couple reach the resolution of their marriage or any family dispute they're having, and with the decisions to complete the filing and move on with their lives. What we essentially have is the emotional divorce and the legal divorce. Mediators take care of the legal divorce, and therapists handle the emotional divorce. Let's explore how we can work together for the greater good of our clients with the following questions and insights. So this is to the entire panel.
Judy, pardon me. Before you go ahead, I forgot to actually let the attendees know. Please put your questions in the chat box. And as we go along, we'll answer your questions one after each posed question. And at the end, we'll answer any remaining questions. Thank you very much. Sorry, Judy. Thank you.
No issues, Marvin. So yes, as we conclude each of the panelists answering each question, there's about 6 of them. Marvin will open it up to a question in the chat. Okay, so here's question number 1. Well, it's number 3 on our outline panel. First question. Everyone has a different approach to therapy and mediation. How do you each work with people going through divorce? What type of therapy do you practice? What type of mediation do you provide? Kathy, why don't you start? Because you have such a fascinating way you approach divorce.
My approach is to understand the client's family system and the why of their behaviors. So it's a detailed process, but I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version. When I work with couples or individuals, I like to initially see each person separately for 2 hours. In the first hour, I just let them tell their story. and I just listen because I want them to feel completely heard without interruption. In the second hour, I have a big, large tablet in my office, and together we draw their family tree. I always tell parents we're going to look at this from a position of understanding, not blame or criticism. Everybody does the best they can given what they know. And I go back 3 generations, starting with grandparents to the client's parents to the client's present family. And I want to know about everybody so I can learn as much as I can about each generation's emotional and behavioral history, how they interact with each other and their children, and what patterns of behavior are being repeated that they may not be aware of. I had a woman in my office, and we did her grandparents. They were married 7 years, had 2 kids, and got divorced. Her parents were married 7 years, had 2 kids, and got divorced. When we got to her, she says, oh my God, I've been married 7 years, I've got 2 kids, and I'm here to get divorced. So we're not aware of how we unconsciously repeat patterns. So if you were my client, I would start by saying, give me 3 words to describe your mother. Give me 3 words to describe your father. What did you learn about marriage from your family? How did your family show love and affection? How did they discipline? How did they handle conflict? What did you learn from your family that you enjoy repeating? And what are you learning that you would like to change? I share this with parents. In all fairness to you, who really teaches us about what to look for in a partner? Who teaches us about marriage or conflict, or what happens when children come along? This family tree becomes my blueprint and an invaluable tool to understand family patterns of behavior. Once a client understands how they arrived at their present situation, they then have choice. If they don't understand the why, they'll likely repeat the same pattern. I'm seeing a client right now. He's on his 4th wife. They're all yellers and screamers. They all throw things. They all demand. They don't listen. And guess what? That's his mom. And he never put the 2 together. So that insight's like, oh my God, because he kept saying, why do I keep choosing the same type of woman over and over again? So it's not the mistakes we make, it's what we learn from them. Few of us are taught to question whether our families, beliefs, and behaviors, which we learned as children, actually work for us as adults, or how those beliefs and behaviors conflict with that of our partner. And in closing, I'm just going to say, think about it for yourself. We're all educated. Some of us in therapy, we have our own lives. And yet when we go back home for visits or family gatherings, what do you find yourself repeating or struggling with because of old family dynamics and expectations? I know it happens to me. Thank you.
And just as a little aside on this, I'm a mediator, not a therapist, but when Kathy, who I've known for years, told me about this approach, and I'm talking to people coming into mediation, and I'm hearing one person talk about the pattern of behavior of their spouse, I just ask one question, and that is, are you familiar with your spouse's family? And all of a sudden, the light bulb goes on. I have to say no more. And they start resolving, and they calm down, and they start blaming, well, for the minute, their spouse, because now they're starting to see what Kathy just described. So for mediators who aren't therapists, learn this, because I think it's invaluable for us to just break a pattern of disillusionment and complaining as we get people in our mediation room. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Victoria, how do you practice?
Okay, so in my psychotherapy practice, when people come in for individual treatment, I work with them sometimes as a coach. I help them to navigate the logistics of divorce. And obviously I can't unlearn the things that I know, so I can sometimes be helpful. But like Kathy, I am deeply psychodynamic in my orientation, which basically means that I believe that the way that we're raised and those relationships are instrumental in affecting the way that we are now. And so, you know, Kathy's talking about bringing things to conscious awareness. And when we have conscious awareness, then we have choice. And so I work with divorcing people individually in therapy to help them to understand how their own histories may be impacting the way that they're showing up in their current divorce, so that they can make choices maybe different from the ones that they are making because they're not conscious of how they were impacted. And then when I'm working with people going through divorce as a mediator, I really try to provide a structure that is containing. You know, I give a roadmap. I help them to understand every decision that they're going to have to make along the way. I encourage a mission statement so that they sit down and they imagine themselves 5 years hence, looking back on the process and saying how they hoped that they had shown up. And then another thing I do is I normalize conflict. And so I build into the ground rules how you're going to manage the conflict and the emotions when they do come up. So it's just sort of start with that as a premise, and let's figure out how we're going to do that. And then, the rest is, a lot of the procedural stuff, and I help them through their financial, disclosure process and all that kind of thing. I do use caucuses from time to time with individuals, particularly if I'm seeing that they cannot really hold their emotions and I'm not able to intervene in ways that are helpful. Sometimes a caucus can be helpful. I like Kathy's approach very much. I think she works primarily with families, with the parents, helping with co-parenting, and that kind of deep approach is helpful. In the mediation, I try to be more present and future focused. So, her work of looking back just for the parenting plan makes a lot of sense. Whereas as a mediator, I try to keep things more present and future focused. So I think that sort of sums up how I work differently as a therapist with individuals going through divorce, and then with couples going through a mediated divorce.
Thank you, Victoria. And Michelle, you have a completely different approach, which is also perfect for divorce or family conflict.
Right. So for the most part, as I said earlier, my position is as the counselor wanting to bring them together. So I may be coming from a slightly different perspective in that when I'm working with a couple, and I work through the lens of a theory called emotionally focused therapy. And what that does, and very much similar to the thread that the presenters have brought forth so far, is that we do look to family history. We do try to understand patterns. But in the present couple, we look for interactional patterns, right? Because most couples are not aware, if you're looking from a bird's eye view down, that there actually is a dance or a pattern that starts to evolve with couples, and they get pretty ingrained in it. And it could be one is bringing up a want or a request, but this one sees it as a criticism. So it comes back with a rebuttal that looks like a defensive comment, which then causes this one to come back or to shut down. And we get into this dance, right? So with couples therapy, we really look at what's happening between them and what's happening inside of them, and see if we can get some deeper understanding as to what's causing the conflict. But of course, we get those couples that really can't either reflect upon themselves and really understand their contribution to the interactional pattern, or they can't understand the other if they've reached a point where they're shut down, or they've been too hurt or just guarded to the point that they can't open up again. So at that point, I am now in the position to offer them the option to really consider uncoupling. And from a therapist standpoint, now that I understand the mediation process so much more in depth, I'm able to guide them to the proper mediator or the proper ways, whereas a lot of therapists don't really understand what mediation is or that it exists. And they'll just say, go talk to a lawyer, go to a divorce lawyer. So that's, my job is to keep them together, but obviously not everyone is meant to be together. So that's why we're doing this panels, to help us all work together better and to network together and to become more of a team effort.
Thank you, Michelle. And then Marvin, how do you approach your mediation practice?
Well, I'm more of a facilitative mediator. I do caucuses, things like that, but my effort is to review the past so that they can move forward to the future. They can plan for the future, because before they understand the past, they can't go to the future. And I'm actually doing something similar to what Kathy does. In speaking with her in our group, and she was explaining her process, I started actually giving each person an hour of individual time that they can talk with me before the actual mediation, so they can get to that past and explain to me if there's anything that we need to clear up before they can actually start on the mediation. And I must say, I've been very pleased with it. I had a recent mediation where actually the husband told me that he just had to address how they separated. Sometimes separations are very messy, and in this case, it was quite messy. And he really felt put upon, and he really felt that he had to let his wife know how he felt with the way she approached it. And that actually helped us. We actually covered it in the mediation when we started. They were actually to gain some understanding so they could move forward. Now it's not a magic bullet, but it actually gave them some understanding so they could actually relate better together. And so we're very pleased with that. Kathy, thank you.
I know it's one of the best systems, isn't it, Marvin? Once I knew about it, I just loved her whole approach. And then for me, I'll be brief. In my mediation, I tend to get a lot of high conflict people for some unknown reason. Marvin's laughing. He's known me for a while. So I do transformative mediation, but I'm ready for the caucus when I have to do it, because I do believe, and I've had my parties tell me, can we just have the room by ourselves for a minute? And I think they do need to breathe. I think they do need to go one-on-one with the mediator, just to air some thinking, maybe a proposal they want to make, but they don't want to say it to the other party just yet. They want to use the mediator maybe as a sounding board. So I do transformative and a little bit of caucus, and that seems to be successful for me. Let's go to the next question. Divorce mediations, or any type of family mediation, they're not all alike. There are different formats to how the mediations are structured. So therapists, first of all, in what types of divorce mediations do you typically engage? What are the different formats? And I'll start with Kathy again first, because you have kind of a unique position in a type of mediation that you actually do that we don't.
Well, I use 3 different styles. And the first style is, in a divorce, I think it's really important to talk about co-parenting and create the parenting plan first, because it's so emotionally charged for parents. And this is a place for them to understand their feelings and work through so they can understand what their children need. And I do this on my own. And if parents start fighting about the money first and the children get lost in their parents' anger, then it's more difficult for parents to switch back and switch gears and focus on the needs of their kids. So when we've completed the parenting plan, I customize it for the family's needs, forward it to the attorney to incorporate in the marital settlement agreement. So that's one way. The second style is I co-mediate. I sometimes co-mediate with family law attorneys because of high conflict emotions between parents, or they're wanting to understand something they may not be able to see. So this way, parents get, the clients get the benefit of the legal as well as the psychological expertise. Sometimes I say that lawyers and therapists are like the CIA and the FBI, and if they shared information, they could get a little bit further. So there was a woman that I was doing a co-mediation with the attorney, and every time her husband spoke, she would just yell at him, and it just wouldn't stop. And so the mediator, the attorney mediator, said, "Why don't you have some alone time with Kathy?" So we went into the other room, and she just vented about how she couldn't stand him. And I said, "What's your goal?" She goes, just want to get this effing thing done. I can't stand this anymore." I said, "Okay, are you aware that every time he says something, you yell and scream?" "I know. I said, "Okay, how about if every time he says something and you start to yell, I put my hand gently on your arm as a reminder that you want to move forward?" She says, okay, I can do that. I won't yell. So we get back in the room. He says something. She immediately starts yelling. I put my hand on her arm and said, "Okay, let's work together." So just that one little tool helped, but she could hear it. And the third style is collaborative law. I've been asked to participate in collaborative law as a coach for parents, and coaches support, motivate, and guide the parties through divorce.
Kathy,
So each party
collaborative mediation, not collaborative law.
Oh, collaborative.
Just to clarify, you're in collaborative mediations. Set it up. What does a collaborative mediation look like, Kathy?
Okay, each party hires their own collaborative attorney to help them negotiate their settlement out of court. If needed, other experts such as coaches, financial planners, real estate experts, accountants, estate planning experts may join the process. This process is private and confidential. So I was in a collaborative process with 15 people in the room. Each party had all these different experts. And it took about probably 10 sessions and they got it all done. But can you imagine the cost? But for them, the money didn't matter. So the key difference in collaborative mediation, an agreement is signed by both parties and their attorneys, stating that if the collaborative process fails, your collaborative attorneys can no longer represent either party in court. And it's a great incentive to work it out.
Thank you, Kathy. Victoria, you work by yourself, true, for the most part in mediations?
I do. I have done a co-mediation model. And I just want to clarify for the audience that what Kathy just described is called collaborative law model. It is a collaborative legal model. So I just want to be clear that that is what it's called.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I work alone. I've worked as a co-mediator on a team with a therapist and a financial person. But my practice now is solo, although I do consult with, and my mediation agreement builds in using other professionals when necessary. So, you know, I can refer out to a financial expert, a forensic type person. I can refer out to an estate planning person, because I kind of practice mediation in a facilitative model, meaning that I'm there to facilitate communication and also to provide people with the resources they need so that they can make the decisions that they need to make. And I refer out to therapists because my mediation model is present and future focused. And if I keep seeing that people need to talk about the past, I don't want to be doing that. And I know Bill Eddy was in the audience. I don't know if he's still there, but you know, one of the things that I learned from him very early on was give them a task to engage their brains, make them, you know, ask them to make a proposal, keep them rooted in the present. But if I see that they can't do that, then I will refer them out to another container for them to deal with the emotional stuff if they'll have it. And for me, that has been helpful. So yeah, that's how I work.
Thank you. And Marvin, how about you? Co-mediate, solo, how did you do it?
For divorce and other family issues, I work solo. I do refer to therapists occasionally when the occasion warrants it, but I usually work by myself. I'm a facilitative mediator also, so I help people, I guide people to their decisions. I don't make decisions for them, but I gently guide them in the right direction. I tell them that when we start, I'm not going to be making any decisions for you. I'm not going to give you opinions unless you ask, and it'll be on a very limited basis. So you have to do the work. I'm just here to guide you. And that's the way I approach it. I like doing it that way. It works for me.
And then from me, I typically work by myself. I don't co-mediate at all. I tried it once and it was difficult for me. But since this is a program about mediators and therapists working together, I have had therapists participate in the mediations. I've had a therapist bring a mediation to me, clients of hers, because she felt she needed to be in the room. They were very volatile and she understood the language they were speaking. And she was right. I was so appreciative that she was always in the room. And then I asked for Kathy to be part of a mediation years later, because Kathy actually had the clients in therapy and then referred them to me to file. But when it was time to mediate their settlement agreement, there were some substance abuse issues going on, lots of denial. And I really thought Kathy as a therapist could be so helpful and instrumental, calming the waters and talking from a slightly different perspective than I could. And that was a wonderful mediation, and they let me do it. That was great. One little short story. I told you I have a lot of high conflict people that come to me. So I had a husband call me one day and say, we would like you to mediate our divorce, but do you mediate people with multiple personalities? I kiddingly asked, can I charge for each personality? But no, I didn't. She reduced it to one personality, but she even said, the wife, if you would like to call my therapist, if things get a little difficult, we can bring him into the mediation. So I've had opportunity to do that, and I appreciate it and I like it. Okay, let's go to, and Michelle, I didn't call on you because, thank you, for obvious reasons. Next question. Picture this. You're in a mediation. It's filled with verbal bullying, yelling, crying, and possibly a power imbalance. Therapists, what tools can you give mediators to use in order to gauge whether to stop or continue an emotionally charged mediation? Anybody can go first.
I'll go first. In working with clients from the beginning, I have a structure of handouts that I start with that I apply in the beginning of each mediation, which provides a format which I find very helpful. So I have a suggested ground rules list, and I have each parent read one line. If they want to talk about it, they talk about it. Second line, here's some samples. We shall take turns speaking and not interrupt each other. We shall not blame, attack, or engage in put downs, and agree to ask questions for the purpose of gaining clarity and understanding only. We will not dwell on things that did not work in the past, but instead will focus on the future. So we would like to create the future we would like to create and refrain from unproductive arguing. So I have like 20 or 25 of these, and we just go down the list, and it diverts their attention as well and helps them focus on the future and how they want to handle it. I also tell them that whatever you do with each other has a domino effect on your kids. Whatever you do, their kids are going to follow. They're not going to follow your words. They're going to follow your behavior. And also 30 years from now, how are these children going to look at you as a mom and a dad who handled this divorce and kept them first and protected them? So, they don't think about things like that because they're so distraught. So I also go into the negative effects of divorce on kids. I have another handout. So prolonged cortisol secretion results in physiological changes that are detrimental to the brain. And chronic stress is one of the risk factors for depression in kids. And there's a whole list of things we go through. I have parents read out loud divorce rules and the impact on their children. So here's a couple of them. Do not talk badly about my other parent. This makes me feel torn apart and makes me feel bad about myself. Do not blame my other parent for the divorce or for things that go wrong in your life. This makes me feel terrible. I just want to be a kid, so please stop putting me in the middle. And when I read through all these things with them, or when they read them out loud, I tell them at the end, children wrote these, not adults. Children wrote these statements. So when parents can't control themselves and get into a power imbalance, like Victoria, I call a timeout and go into caucusing and see them separately, sometimes for 15 minutes, sometimes for 30 minutes, or we wait till the next session. If they can't be in the same room, I'll see them separately, and sometimes that works out. In terms of resources, I have a list of books for parents to read, especially anything written by Bill Eddy, anything, who is a clinical social worker and an attorney. I mean, his words are just invaluable. You're a genius, Bill. And everything you've written has been so helpful to me and to parents. So thank you.
And it sounds like what you do is truly what Victoria said. You get them to focus on something else. You break that arguing impasse, I guess. And,
yeah, because their frontal lobe shuts down and they can't think.
Yeah.
They can't make executive decisions. They're just, you see a movie where somebody's all over the place. They can't think. So that's when you divert the attention.
How about you, Victoria?
Well, I like to start by normalizing conflict, as I suggested at the beginning of the process. I do engage them in the ground rule setting, Kathy, like you do, and I give them examples of things that they might endorse. We won't interrupt each other. We'll take turns talking. One of the ones that I use is, will you permit Victoria, me, to intervene when she believes that the communication is not helpful? And if they agree to that, then I take it another step further. And will you try some of the suggestions that she makes to help the communication to go more smoothly? And then I use Bill Eddy's idea that you have to get them out of their limbic system and into a more rational place of make a proposal. The other thing that I will do sometimes is it's borrowed from my I did level 3 training of Gottman's work, and they do something to help people with what they call diffuse physiological arousal, or DPA, and that's basically some mindfulness and breathing. Sometimes you can get them to ground themselves and get refocused in a mediation session. That can be helpful. So those are the main tools and techniques. And yes, a caucus session sometimes is important. The other thing that I also share with people is the divorce rules from children, because I actually taught some of those high conflict parenting classes in my clinical training. And those rules are incredibly powerful when you read them to parents and ask them to share. But in the moment, I find the make a proposal helpful, and maybe let's breathe together. Let's try an I statement here or there instead of the you statement. One other thing that I use is I try to see if I can get them to use something called an intentional dialogue, to really slow down and to listen to each other, and just, it's a little primitive that I just ask them to repeat what they've heard. It doesn't mean if you repeat it that you agree with it, but sometimes you can see that somebody's energy will shift if they hear their spouse saying something that they have actually said, and not distorting it or changing it around. And then to validate, what they said, you're not crazy, and imagine what they're feeling, the empathy piece. Sometimes that's a harder thing to get people to do if they're really flooded, though.
I like that, though. That's good. Now, Michelle, even though you're not a mediator, you still have couples in the room and they become very high energy and engaged. What do you do in therapy to calm them down and get them to refocus? Michelle, are you there? Did we lose her?
I think
Where'd she go?
Oh, no. Okay, well, when she comes back, she gets the floor. Marvin, how about you?
Okay, well, basically, I'm a facilitator, as I said, and I use caucus if people are having a lot of problems controlling themselves. What I'll do is I'll offer them, would you rather just talk to me individually, separately for this process? And sometimes they do, and sometimes I can bring them back together. But that seems to work very well for me. Maybe it's a little like cheating, because I don't keep them together the whole time. But I know some mediators actually do that for all of their mediations. But I find that works very well. And sometimes I'll say, I think I need to take a break. So let's come back in about 10 minutes. And that gives them a little time to calm down. And if I can, I do something for them in the break. So when we come back, we're not just focused on what we were focused on when we left. For instance, if I said I was going to have a referral or something or other, I'll present that. And that helps divert their attention from their madness. I also use ground rules. What I do, instead of what Kathy and Victoria do, I don't do it in the meeting, but I send out ground rules before the session, and I have them sign the ground rule. And when I first started doing it, I wasn't expecting them to actually sign them and to actually refer to them. But actually, most of them act like grown-ups, and they actually do. Wow. And when I bring them up, they say, oh yeah, that's right. And so that helps to regulate that madness also. Another thing that I do is, just like Victoria said, Bill Eddy is a genius. Proposals work wonders. I'll ask them, okay, so I know you said about this, but what do you think is a good idea? What's your proposal for how you should do this? And that helps too. That helps to calm them down and give them direction, so that they can move ahead. Also, if there's some kind of, if you're working with dividing property or something or other, to have them do some sort of calculation to make them use the frontal cortex instead of the reptilian brain. That does wonders also sometimes. And sometimes you just can't get around it. They're just out there, and so you have to take I'll say, well, you just want to take a break. Let's take a break. Maybe we should end the session and come back next time. And sometimes that works too. So I do whatever I can. Occasionally, I do something similar to what Victoria said she does, and repeating what they hear each other say. I do that, but I take it a step further and actually ask them to be the other person. So to actually present the other person's position. That means they have to actually listen to what the other person is saying and actually have some basic understanding of what they're saying, so they can actually give it back, even if it's just a verbatim repeating. I find that helps a great deal also. So just a few things that I use, other things too, but.
That's great. Victoria, did you want to make another point? I saw you agreeing. Did you want to say anything else?
No. I was just welcoming Michelle back.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Michelle. Where are you? Is she really back?
I'm back. I lost connection, but I'm here.
Okay, so Michelle, I was asking, even though you don't mediate, you still have couples in the room. They still get very volatile. So as a therapist, How do you get things to calm down so you can move forward and get some work done with them?
Right. And that's very common. Obviously, they're escalated, they're activated, their systems are up and running. So I would say, and it kind of echoes what Marvin was saying, one of the primary things I'll do is I will match them. So I will go to the first person and try to match whatever emotion they're expressing at the moment. I can see you, this is really upsetting to you. I got it. And I'll repeat back to their words, because most of the time what they're so upset about is that they don't feel heard. They're not getting what they want from the other person. They're not feeling like they're getting it from me in that moment. So I attune, A-T-T-U-N-E, attune to the person so that they feel heard, they feel seen. I ask the other person to hang tight. I know you've got stuff. I want to hear you too. And you can visibly see them kind of calm down. I haven't agreed with them. I haven't told them anything. I've simply expressed through reflecting their words, reflecting their tone, that I've got them. I got it. You are really upset. And this is really hard for you. And this is really hard for you to continue to hear what he's saying or she's saying. And I got it. And they're like, yeah, you get me. Okay. And you can kind of watch them calm down. And I'll even try to take a deep breath, almost encouraging them, like, yeah. And you watch them do it with you. And then I turn to the other and say, I get it. You're really upset too. And I'll normalize, like Victoria was saying, like, of course you're upset. This is really upsetting when you perceive this person as being X, Y, Z. So it's a lot of helping them in the moment to feel seen and heard. And then also reminding them, from a mediator's perspective, that what we're doing is, trying to conduct a mediation. And from a therapist point of view, it's, guys, we're really trying to understand each other. So I'm so grateful that you're telling me what's going on, and let's kind of take a few breaths and try to continue on this process of understanding what's happening here. So
thank you. Excellent. And then from me, I just, because this is something that nobody else has said, Marvin, and I'll be brief. I have found that every couple has a language of their own, every culture and every nationality too. Because I'm full Italian, don't let Weigel fool you, I am full-blooded Italian. When I get other Italians, Brazilians, other, very hot-blooded cultures in the mediation, it's actually like being at Sunday dinner when I was a kid. I understand the passion in the conversation. So due to my heritage and familial experience with high energy communication, I give hot-blooded people an opportunity to be loud, and I watch their communication arc to see how they self-regulate their volume and their passion. So I do give time to arguing. And then I think we all have to be sensitive to couples and how they communicate so that we know how to speak to them, how to react to them, and what to expect of them. So not all couples communicate alike. So Marvin, did you want to do a chat? Because I know we haven't done that yet. Okay, so we can't hear you, Marvin.
Sorry about that.
Say that again.
I haven't done any questions from the chat because they haven't had any questions yet.
Oh, they haven't had any questions? Okay.
No
all right then.
yet.
Well, just
but I would like to say something. Actually, you brought up something that I remember that you had told us a story, and it was where a couple was so dysregulated, they could not stay in the same room, and you had to actually end the mediation. They decided not to come to see you. But then I don't remember the time frame, whether it was a year or 6 months later, they come back to you.
It was the multiple personality couple.
Was that it?
It was the multiple personality couple. And it was every mediation was a 6-hour mediation. And I was not allowed to speak. Every time I tried to engage, they stopped me. We just want you to sit here. We'll handle it. And so at one point I said, well, can I eat? My kitchen is right next to the room here. Take a snack and come back and we'll handle it. We had 4 or 5 mediations like that. And then they got so bad. They went in the hall. They were screaming, I have a license here at this office building. I cannot have people misbehaving. And so I just said, I can't see you anymore. A year went by and the wife called me and said, what do we have to do to get you to see us? We're ready to finish. Every couple has their own timeline. And I said, I think it's best if I only saw one of you at a time. And that's how we finished. So, you know, you just have to be sensitive to everybody, and everybody's different.
And you attract all the differences.
I get the high conflict. Thank you, Bill Eddy, for setting me up to do this. Okay, now Kathy started with resources, but I wanted to segue into panel. What kind of resources can we give mediators to better understand the psychology of the parties coming to mediation? What do you think? Or should I start? Okay, well, I'll start here. I think you should join every association that has therapists. So I belong to Los Angeles Marriage and Family Therapists. I have learned so much over the past 6 or 7 years from listening to the speakers, getting to know fabulous people like Michelle, Kathy, Victoria. Marvin belongs to that organization as well. But Victoria and Marvin belong to Los Angeles Psychological Association, right? Same kind of group, right?
Yes.
And books. I mean, books. Bill Eddy, of course, 24 books. They're on my website, every one of them. And there's other authors. So panel, join in. What other ideas can you give mediators to more understand the psychological profile of people in conflict?
Well, I just like to comment. I do belong to LACPA, which is LA County Psychological Association. And they give talks from time to time about various topics, about couples and things like that, and various ways of approaching therapy. And I've gained a lot from that. Even though I don't perhaps always understand exactly what they're saying, I get the idea of how to approach things, and it really is helpful. And I can actually do some research on my own to actually understand better what they're talking about. And occasionally I'll have the occasion to talk with them also. So that's very helpful in understanding the psychology of people that you're meeting with. I really do also encourage you to connect with therapists if you're doing divorce mediation or any other kind of family mediation, so that you can help clients through the process. Not that you're trying to diagnose them or anything, but just so you understand, so you can understand what's happening with them.
Thank you, ladies. Any comments?
There's a great video called Split.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And all these different kids go on the video and they talk about how the divorce has impacted them. And it's always sold at all these conferences. And it's a great video for mediators to have. And they can even show it to their clients.
Kathy, we went to the child custody all-day seminar that Los Angeles County Bar Association was putting on. And Ellen Bruno, we saw her give the speech, the one who produced Split.
Yes.
I have given that the name of that video to everybody. But you know, also HBO has some documentaries, children talking about how the divorce affected them, but what the bottom line is, as long as their parents get along, that's all they care about. Victoria, Michelle, do you have any resources you would like to provide?
I think the idea of networking with people who do different kinds of things is really helpful. You know, we're talking, it's therapists and mediators, so network, yeah, learn about what therapists are doing. Some of the interventions are very helpful. When I was starting to learn mediation, I was not a therapist then, but I'd been in therapy, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of this that feels very therapeutic to me that I'm learning in mediator school. So I think that it's important to, expose yourself to lots of different disciplines, and also not just therapists, but if you're going to do divorce mediation, it's helpful to know something about the financial piece. It's helpful, not that you would do it, but to know about it, to know about some of the estate planning issues that come up, to understand some of the, valuation issues that come up. I think it's helpful to be conversant in those things. I think there's so many good resources now available, and we're all this panel is full of big Bill Eddy fans, and his High Conflict Institute is a great resource. The AFCC also has really good resources, the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. Yeah. If the mediators go on and look at that, they'll see many, many resources. And then finally, another resource that I like to provide people is the site for the California Superior Court. There are many resources there for divorce. They even have a new system that I think was developed during the pandemic, kind of you can do it yourself divorce, but it's got lots of different parenting plans on it. It's got like a cartoon for kids that they can look at. So actually the court's websites have a lot of really important and good resources for people navigating divorce. And I think the mediators should know about it to give that to their folks.
I know you've always used the court website. I remember you talking about how valuable it was to you. And Michelle, so yeah, from a therapist point of view, how can you guide mediators to learn more about the emotional disposition of their clients?
Sure. Yeah. There's a book I'd love you guys to check out, and it's called Hold Me Tight. And it's by Sue Johnson. She's one of the originators of the theory that I work under, which is emotionally focused therapy. And in that book, I mean, if you have ever been a partner, you'll identify yourself somewhere in there. It describes a lot of the very common interactional patterns that are present. The blame game, the protest polka, and it describes in really entertaining fashion what kind of interactional disconnect can happen based on each person's own psychology. And that goes back to Kathy's point, the family history. There's different attachment styles based on how you received parenting, right? So if you're an anxiously attached partner, you will start to freak out anytime you sense that your partner's going away emotionally, physically, or otherwise. Are you there for me? So once you read that book, you may have a greater sense when you start to be able to pick up when you're in mediation, who's the anxious one? Who's the avoidant one? Who's the one instigating? Who's the one who's always having to blame? So it might be a helpful resource for you to really understand the interactional patterns so that you can address it, not by saying you're an anxiously attached partner, but say, I see that you're having some anxiety here, and I get it. It's really hard when he or she says that and you go into that panic. Not that you're going to be therapist, but it really does help give you some insight into what might be going on for them individually. Hold me tight.
And you know what? And I'm sorry, Michelle.
I was going to suggest, why don't us panelists put the resources we mentioned in the chat, if that would.
Okay, absolutely. And I know you want to do a question because I saw them coming through the chat, but you know what? My podcast, to be honest with you, I interview therapists, authors. Bill Eddy has 2 interviews in January of 2020 on the podcast. I just stole somebody from Los Angeles Marriage and Family Therapists. They talked about financial infidelity, the malfeasance, the misuse of money in a relationship, which is at the top of the ring of why people get divorced. Their financial relationship falls apart. So yeah,
I can't recommend Judy's podcast enough. I find it very entertaining. I learn something every time I'm listening. So while you're driving, none of us are really driving that much anymore, but tune in. I would highly advise it.
Thank you. Okay, Marvin, you have some questions from the chat.
Yes, I do. From Bill Eddy, actually. He says his newest book is Mediating High Conflict Disputes. which is being released on June 15th on Amazon and everywhere. But his question is, do you ever have conversations between therapist and mediator about a difficult couple? Any of you?
Well, yes, Kathy and I. So, and that was going to go into the next question. This is a perfect segue. How do we literally connect in dialogue or within the mediation? Have any of the therapists ever been asked by their clients to dialogue with the mediator? Mediators, have you ever had occasion to bring in a therapist like I have?
I have a case that it didn't work out, but I'll tell you why. I got a referral from an attorney to work with a high conflict couple, and he shared that husband was willing to be cooperative, but wife was extremely high conflict. And because I was told this from the beginning, I asked for signed releases from both parents to speak to their attorneys in case it was necessary. So I could see the writing on the wall, and they both agreed. So I tried seeing them together. I tried seeing them separately, but she said she was only in the mediation because her lawyer told her to be there. So wife was furious with husband and wouldn't agree to anything regarding their son, who was 2 years old. And she was just entrenched in going to court. And this is just an example of her thinking. In terms of timeshare, she was adamant that the only way she would agree to overnights with the father was when he was 10 years old. If he asked her to an overnight, she would say yes. That she said that was the only thing she was going to agree upon. I would love to know how Bill Eddy would have handled that one. So I did have to call the lawyer and explain what was going on, that this wasn't going to be something that we could work out.
Are we allowed to have Bill unmute and respond to this?
Absolutely.
What do you think, Bouvier and Marvin?
I think we are. Bill, would you like to answer that?
Well, first, thanks for promoting my books and methods. I think the key is, to me, is creating a community around the parents of really simple skills. And part of this came to me from being a chemical dependency therapist in psychiatric hospital outpatient clinics, with collaborating with AA and Narcotics Anonymous, and the idea you create a culture that has really simple skills to focus on. And that's why the proposal approach, teaching them the approach and really steering clear of, as much as possible, the past, insight, emotions, and keeping them focused on thinking and doing in the present. And so, and I also think realizing we're not going to reach everybody is an important thing to know. But I think in these kinds of cases, if mediators, therapists, lawyers all focus the parties on using a few simple skills, that they really have a chance of reaching agreements. Also, we need to be patient with high conflict people, because they have to process things twice, emotionally and then logically. And so I think teamwork is so important. And that's one thing I think is great that you're doing this seminar today, because I think if we reinforce the same things, even if we don't talk to each other, that there's a better chance that they can focus and solve some of their problems.
Bill, have you ever had therapists participate in your mediation when you were doing full-blown mediation?
Were you asking me that?
I am.
Yes. So at time, it's very rare. I've had a therapist present. Of course, having collaborative orientation, I've also done where there's a financial advisor present, and sometimes lawyers for the parties. But I find it really helpful that you're reinforcing the skills. I might mention an interesting thing with our New Ways for Families skills training counseling, where we ran a program in Alberta, Canada, that they actually had the therapist and, for example, a judge who was doing a mediation, had the therapist sit in with the judge and remind the people to use their skills, Remember, ask questions about proposals instead of reacting. Use your calming, encouraging statement to stay calm. So yes, but very rarely.
I know, me too. Does anybody want to add anything more to how mediators and therapists could actually talk and engage? Marvin?
Yes, actually, if you're networking with therapists, you could actually ask if one of them would be willing to act as a coach for the couple in mediation if they're dysregulated, if they're having trouble with controlling their emotions. You could actually ask if they could coach one. I'm not sure about how both, but at least one of them, and perhaps having two therapists coach them individually. But that would actually work also if you find therapists who are willing to do that. And I think as we move forward as therapists and mediators do begin to work more closely, that may be a possibility.
Thank you. And would anybody else like to comment before? Go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, well, that's actually the collaborative law model, Marvin, is, you know, that each party has their own lawyer that enters into a stipulation agreeing that they will not litigate under any circumstances, but everyone can have a coach too, a mental health coach who will be part of the team. And sometimes there's even a coach for the kids who gets to talk to the children if that's necessary. But that model is what they use in the collaborative family law paradigm. So.
Yes, but what I'm suggesting is that mediators who don't do collaborative could actually ask a therapist to actually act in that capacity, even if it's not in the mediation, but outside of the mediation, actually to help them to understand what they're doing so they can actually control themselves better. But however you do it, I think that's a resource that we rarely tap. We actually do that.
I have one last question, and then we can deal with chat questions, Marvin.
Yeah.
Close. Okay, one final. So what can and should mediators do if they see that one party is ready to resolve and the other party isn't? For me, and I'll start it off and it'll be very brief, when that happens, one party's ready to move forward, the other party isn't. And I just had that situation where we got to the third draft of the stipulated judgment because I was filing for them as well. We had 3 mediations going into that. And the wife was silent for 3 months. And the husband was so fearful that she was getting with an attorney and was going to change the entire mediation. And I just took a leap and I said, look, I think we're looking at the emotional divorce versus the legal divorce. I think your wife is still processing and going through the emotional divorce. I hope I'm not wrong, but that's kind of how I see it. I don't think she's going to change the agreement. And she didn't, thank heavens. When she was ready at the end of 3 months, there she was again, ready to move forward. Unfortunately, the husband wanted to change everything at that point. But that is, we go back to how we started this. There's the emotional divorce and the legal divorce. And I think we each have to be sensitive to the timing of it all. So panel, Marvin, you have an interesting thing with discernment counseling. Talk about that.
Yes, that's something that I learned online. It was about discernment. And I think Michelle knows the gentleman who actually created it. But it's actually
Bill Doherty.
Yes, that's right, Bill Doherty. Thank you, Michelle. It's actually a form of therapy that actually addresses the willingness to divorce. So are they in the place where they're willing to divorce? So if you have a couple and one person is ready to divorce, the other one isn't, or perhaps they're both feeling a little ambivalence about the process, you can refer them to the discernment counseling, which I have done, and we can actually work through issues that are there. And it's a very limited process. There are only, I think, 4, maybe 5 sessions to the therapy. And at that point, the therapist says, okay, either you have decided or you have not, but this is the end of this process. And then they move forward however they wish to at that point. But it's actually very helpful. I actually referred a couple to them, and unfortunately they didn't come back to me, but
they worked with Michelle.
they worked through it, but then they decided they wanted divorce, but because I was geographically undesirable, they went with another mediator. But I felt good about it anyway, that I was actually able to help them with that. I'd like to tell you a little story too about a couple. Actually, one of the first couples I actually helped in divorce. We were discussing property division, and we got to the house, and it was decided that they had to sell the house. So the husband kept saying, well, you won't cooperate, so we can actually sell the house. We need to sell the house so we can divide the money and go on our way. Well, the wife kept putting up roadblocks, one roadblock after another. It was timing or the amount they were dividing, whatever it was, she kept putting up a roadblock. So I decided, well, okay, let's stop and caucus. I really wanted to speak with her and find out what was going on. I thought I knew what was happening, but I stopped and I talked to her and I said, what's happening? You don't seem to be, you're not cooperating very well with this process. And she came up with some excuses. I said, it doesn't seem like you're ready to get this divorce. Do you really want to do this? And she admitted to me, she said, no, I really don't. I really don't want to get a divorce. I want to work it out. I said, well, you know, most likely, even if you don't want to, he's going to go ahead with the process. So maybe you should cooperate and get the best that you can out of this process. And she thought about it a few minutes. I gave her some time. And she said, okay, I'm ready. And just that process and just that short time, she was able to make up her mind that I better go ahead and do this. He really wants to do this, so I should do it. So they went ahead, and in a short time, they were able to finish. Sometimes I think it's just a matter of calling it to the person's attention that that's really what's going on. And maybe that will help them to decide.
Yes. And Victoria, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo this idea that that the tool that Kathy started talking about, which is bringing things that are not in conscious awareness into conscious awareness, that can be very liberating for people. And that, you know, that's definitely a therapy tool is, you know, but the mediator tool is, let's find out what the underlying issue is. I mean, I remember that was how it was languaged in mediator school. What's the underlying issue? What's driving the conflict? It's not what it's about something else underneath it. And so in that way, therapists and mediators are both interested in that idea of unearthing what's underneath, of bringing into conscious awareness what's not conscious, because if it's in the open, then people can make choices about it.
Nicely said. Would anybody else like to add before I turn this over to Marvin for the chat questions?
Yeah, I have a short story to tell. I had a 35-year-old man come in sharing he got married at 21 and they had 2 children. And he said he loved his wife, but he was no longer in love with her. He never really had a chance to date, and they were now like roommates. So when they both came in, he shared he wanted a divorce. And she was emotionally exhausted, panicked, and couldn't stop crying. They were 2 really nice people who grew apart, yet they were committed to be co-parent together. So to make a long story short, husband agreed to counseling for 1 year and agreed to take divorce off the table. So we talked about all the things that they didn't talk about in their marriage because they never wanted to rock the boat. So their home had a guest house, and when husband stayed in the back house and still got to see their kids. And then a little over a year, the wife came in and she spoke first and said, "Thank you for giving me the process." She said this to her husband. "Thank you for giving me the time to process this. I now understand why we're getting divorced, and I know you'll still be part of the family." So they then saw the mediation attorney for all the finances, and it got done in a few sessions. But if they had tried to do that in the beginning, it could have turned into a nightmare. So this guy is the poster child for kindness and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, it's so important that we all pay attention to the emotions and when they're ready and when we're not. Michelle, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've talked about discernment counseling, but I just want to make sure you guys know it's a separate type of couples counseling than regular couples counseling. And basically it just boils down to helping a couple pick one of three paths. And it kind of lays it out really clearly so the couple understands what they're doing. Path one, stay married and no change. So they know that's an option. Path two, move forward towards divorce or separation. Path three, like Kathy mentioned, take divorce or separation off the table and work on your marriage for 6 months or however long is decided. So it kind of helps them choose their path. And then once they're on that path, they have a clearer way of how to move forward. So that's called discernment counseling. And there are counselors out there that are specifically market themselves as just doing that. So I just want to clarify that for you.
It's such a wonderful process to be able to use, because sometimes people aren't as clear as they need to be when they're engaging in the divorce process, and started for reasons that may not need to be reasons after a while if they just sort things out. So thank you for that. Would anybody else like to make any comment on the panel about anything before we turn this over to Marvin? Victoria?
I just wanted to say that what sums up for me what Kathy shared in the story is sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And it's a paradoxical statement, but I often use it in my mediations to help people to understand that if you want to go fast, you're going to have to slow down.
Yeah, love it. I love that. And by the way, I learned something and I go back to Kathy, I have to apologize. I always thought collaborative was called collaborative mediation, and I'm so sorry. But yes, this was my little learning lesson today, and I appreciate that.
Always learning.
Always learning. And I'm always learning from all of you. I appreciate my relationships with each and every one of you. I do. So Marvin, take it away.
Okay, thank you. We do have a few questions, but there was a comment from Susie North regarding her recent experience. Susie, do you want to expound a bit on what you had been doing with the networking group?
Sure. I don't want to take much time, but I was invited to join a group by someone who might have mistakenly thought I was a therapist. And I said, but I'm not a therapist. And they said, well, come anyway. It's a really great group. And it is. It's a very young and fun group. They meet at a very cool bar here in Silver Lake. Always a fun gathering. And so I get to market mediation to a room full of non-mediators and kind of explain a little bit about what it's like. And it's a great opportunity. I've met so many wonderful young therapists. And as I said, I always just say, well, it's a psychology adjacent. And they just laugh,
I love
the name of their group. What's the name of the group, Susie? It's okay if you don't.
I'm not sure. I'm going to get it right. It's
okay. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Marketing support group.
Susie, if you think about it in the next few minutes by 1:30, put it in the chat and Marvin will read it. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Marvin.
Thanks, Susie. Okay, I do have a question from Gail Glazer. This subject today is dear to my heart. This question is for each panel member. Sometimes in a mediation, it becomes obvious very quickly that one of the parties may have an undiagnosed mental illness that renders that person unable to process information because she is so impaired. We're talking psychosis, paranoia, bipolar disorder, alcohol, drug addiction, schizophrenia, narcissism, multiple personality disorder, Judy, etc.
Do I have one?
No, but you attract them.
I do.
The question is, how would each of you proceed in that situation? Victoria.
So this came up for me recently. They were referred to me by their marriage therapist, who then became his individual therapist. And it turned out that he'd been diagnosed with epilepsy. And he wanted their individual therapist to help him to process what was going on in the mediation session, because, high emotion will trigger sometimes a seizure. And ultimately, I decided that I could not work with him in mediation, that it was not going to be a balanced process. It was not, he really lacked capacity. If he could not process what was going on without the help of his therapist, that I needed to not be involved with that. And so my decision was to, in a very kind and very gentle way, try to explain the issue of capacity, that that what the ultimate goal of a divorce mediation is to end up with an agreement. And in order to enter into an agreement, you have to have legal capacity to do that. And it was clear to me that he didn't and wouldn't. I have a study group that actually Armony, who's I see is here also, as part of, and consulted with some of the members of that group. Some suggested maybe getting a conservator involved, but I wasn't prepared to do that. So as I said, I did a very kind and gentle sort of removal of myself from the process. And I don't know what's going to happen with them ultimately, but that was how I resolved it in that particular situation.
Years ago, Victoria, I had a couple with bipolar was the personality disorder du jour. It has now morphed to narcissism. But when everybody was bipolar for some reason, both spouses talked about it, but she had it managed. She said it was managed. She was seeing a therapist, medicine, and that's fine. We get to the very end of the settlement agreement. We cleaned up everything in the draft. And in 2 or 3 emails, each spouse said, I'm very much concerned about the bipolar disorder that may have affected some of the decisions that are resting in this agreement. And I immediately said, then I would like you each to see attorneys to have this reviewed. And to the woman, I said, maybe can your therapist participate? Can your therapist maybe read this over with an attorney of your choice, just to make sure you're clear? And I thought that was very reasonable and responsible of me. They hated me for it. They hated spending the money on attorneys, but I still felt as a professional that when I'm getting 2 and 3 emails with each spouse being concerned that the disorder was affecting the bottom line decisions, I just didn't know what else to do. So I did what I thought was right. And it doesn't always come out perfectly, as you said, but anybody have a comment on that? Bill, do you have a comment on that? Since he's here.
Well, actually, I think a couple things. One is at the beginning is really emphasizing having them review the agreement so that it's not a shock at the end. But I've also had cases where I've said, I can't proceed unless you have lawyers in the room to assist you in processing. Because I had a case with a man who, he'd been a bank vice president, but he was starting to have signs of dementia. And so I said, you have to have a lawyer in the room who can then go and explain this stuff. I think also pacing the process so they do get to process with a therapist or lawyer and not meeting quite as frequently. It really depends on the case, but I really like the teamwork approach. And I think laying that out at the beginning, it may be necessary. Just like I like to meet with people together, I say it may be necessary for me to meet with each of you separately occasionally. May be necessary to have another professional come in to assist in the process. So I think predicting all these potentials at the beginning, then if later on you say we really need to do this, then it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Marvin.
Something that I've started doing, actually it was a result of Kathy actually sharing again her process. Thanks again, Kathy. I've started to make sure that in my discussions with them, those 1-hour sessions I spend with them at the beginning, that I ask them, if they don't bring it up, have you been in therapy? Have you? And so then, if I encountered a situation like that, I can actually refer them back to therapy and say, you know, this is perhaps not going as well as we would like it to go. Perhaps you should connect with your therapist again so you can get some help in being able to understand or being able to process so that we can communicate better. but it seems like that would be a better way of referring them to therapy if you've already breached that ground in the beginning, rather than having to do it in the moment, which is they may become upset with you like they did with you, Judy.
Yeah.
If you're, it becomes accusatory rather than just referring.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is what I was fearing, because I saw it happen with my predecessor, that if you don't take care of business before everything goes to the court, the judgment package, you really let yourself stand out for, once the divorce is final, they can come back to you and say, why didn't you stop us? Why didn't you make us think? Why, and I saw it become my predecessors. They were blaming my predecessor. And I said, well, I don't want that to happen to me. You can get mad at me now, but I want you to have all the professional help and support you can get so that you don't have divorce settlement remorse. So that was my further thinking. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Well, another thing that I always do is I always advise them to consult with an attorney. Consult with an attorney, not hire an attorney to represent them, but to consult with an attorney, either before they start, during the mediation, or after the mediation. It's preferable if they do it before, so that they know what they're doing when they're going through it. But some people don't want to do that. But at least at the end, if they can connect with an attorney to make sure that they understand what they might be giving up, what they're gaining, just understand what they're doing. That's very key. I can't stress too much that understanding is key when you're coming to this type of an agreement.
Informed consent.
Yes.
I'd like to just add one thing. I know we're at the end of our session and we're closing up in a few minutes. If anyone wanted to add in the chat what they found useful about today's panel, we would really appreciate that, so that we can continue to evolve this panel and make sure that we know what worked and know anything that you might have wanted to hear about. And Gail, I do notice that you said the undiagnosed mental illness, right? So, right, I mean, we can only do what we can do, right? We can make it explicit. We can say, I don't know that this is working. I'm not sure you're understanding me. And then the other comments that the other presenters made about seeking, a therapist's help to kind of help guide them, because, they've gone through their life at this point undiagnosed. That's what the hand they were given. So we can only do what we can do. Yeah.
There's a question from Stacy Lisk, and I think it's a good one. I think it would be helpful to look at it.
Yes, I just saw that. There's a question before that one. I have to find it again now. Okay, it's from Maria Simpson. Is there a resource on psychodynamics?
Ooh.
Anyone?
Let me go to my bookcase.
Well,
it's so involved. It's so multi-layered.
I think for this purpose, maybe like, sort of the systemic psychodynamic stuff would be the most helpful. Like we were talking about multi-generational, Kathy. Murray Bowen's work is really helpful. He's psychodynamically informed, but he thinks systemically. And since we're working with systems, I think that would be a great resource. I'll put it in the chat, the name of this particular theorist. What else do you think, Kathy?
Oh, I was just going to go off what Marvin said, that I invite couples to have a consultation with a mediation-friendly attorney, so they don't get somebody who's going to escalate things. And if they do decide to mediate, at least they have resources right there. Because I know some clients just immediately go to a litigator and they're terrified with what they're told, and they're asked for a $10,000, $20,000 retainer. So I like them to see a mediator.
Kathy, were you going to say something else? You raised your hand a second ago. Is this what you were going to say, or is there something else you wanted to add?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sure. Go ahead, Marvin.
One last question from Stacy List, the one that you saw, Victoria. I am curious. Therapists can mediate a couple they are working with, but a mediator cannot act as a therapist to the couple. Question. That's the question. So in other words, if you're doing one role, can you actually do the other role for that couple?
Oh, perfect for Victoria and Kathy.
Well, the answer is no, because it's considered a dual role. If you're the mediator, you're the mediator. If you're the therapist, you're the therapist. You cannot cross lines.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
But you can never get rid of your therapist risings if you're serving as the mediator, right?
Right. Well, you can't unknow what you know, but like it's really important that you're clear in your informed consent documents or your mediation agreement, confidentiality agreement, or whatever, what role you're playing. And I never switch hats. I'm very, very clear about that because I like my licenses and I like to continue.
You want to keep them.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes after a mediation, a client will say, oh, can you now be my therapist? And I say, no, I can't. And it's already in my agreement.
Yes. Right.
And they don't understand why.
Yeah, it's in my agreement. It's on my website that, you know, I'm very clear about maintaining my separate lanes. Yeah.
Marvin, you are in control.
I don't see any more questions, so I think we have come to the end.
Oh my gosh, we're exactly on time. Well, thank all of you in the panel, first of all. It really has been a great experience. We worked so hard to get to this point, and thank you for all of that. And I want to thank everybody who joined us today. This is marvelous. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Yes, thank you to our panelists and for everybody who's here. I hope everybody has a wonderful Memorial Day weekend.